When watching Daredevil, I of course loved the show, but I immediately took a liking to Punisher when you compare the two's dynamic because it's extremely pragmatic. But I do love that they reiterate in the form of Matt Murdock that it's not okay to hurt people in the pursuit of justice. But I do also love the idea that the show tackles that part of us that inherently wants revenge. This is a trend that's common in various forms of media like The Last of Us, or even again in Marvel with Charles and Eric in X-Men. And despite characters trying to make their peers feel bad for hurting people and being violent, I'm sorry, when I heard Frank Castle say when he hits them they stay down, I immediately had to stand. And that's not to say that I don't like Matt Murdock. I love Matt Murdock, but when you throw people off a building and beat them into the hospital and you don't want them to die, despite what you wanted that outcome to be, they probably still flatline. In this video, I will be looking at Frank Castle and Karen Page, the ship that outshipped every ship, the ship that sailed 1,000 ships, the ship that launched 1,000 ships. Yeah. Sure. Castle is my favorite ship ever. We'll be getting into the reasons why, and despite how much I want to just show you clips of the show and be like, look at how they look at each other, I will be examining this in detail. At the time of me posting this, Daredevil Born Again will either be out or almost out. I don't know. It depends on how much work I give myself. Unfortunately, even though this was literally so much work for me to do in under a month, I have this incessant need to put this out into the universe because I have a feeling that Karen and Frank will not even look at each other or have a scene together in Daredevil Born Again. I also have a really strong feeling that Karen or Foggy is not even surviving the show. And to that I say, there will be. And on top of me doing all this research and being a full-time student, it's also Black History Month at the time of filming, and I never thought I would be writing this hard for white people, but here we go. As in all of my analysis videos, I'm assuming that you've seen this, and if I had to recount every single thing for y'all, we will be here for 5 days. And even though I love Steve Rogers, we are not the same. I cannot do this all day. I'm sorry to tell you right now. And just to introduce our players before we really get into it, I think I can best describe them as like Grumpy Sunshine. Grumpy is just grumpy, and Sunshine is morally gray, so instead of being sunshine, it's like a cloudy day.
Oh, see that there. Who needs affection when I have blind hatred?
For me, Grumpy Sunshine is a trope that I really love because I love to see like the grumpy be softened by the inherently good nature of the Sunshine character. And as usual, I love to use sources, so I used a very and extremely trustworthy one, Reddit. Now the particular thread I found was just about finding Grumpy Sunshine tropes in books, but I love the way that they define the trope, so I'm gonna quote it here. They say, quote, Grumpy Sunshine is a subset of opposites attract. One character is grumpy, surly, generally cantankerous, and the other is bright, positive, and bubbly. Don't be confused, those words are all synonyms. However, I did learn the word cantankerous today. I only recognized the tank part because I have Marvel Rivals brain rot. Some examples of the Grumpy Sunshine trope are 10 Things I Hate About You, Pride and Prejudice, New Girl, That's What the Streets Are Telling Me. I've never seen Pride and Prejudice or New Girl. However, I have seen Abbott Elementary, so that is a great example because I love them. In general, I kind of blanked, so I just went on Google and looked up examples of the trope, and they also said Frozen and Why Did I Get Married, which is insane because Why Did I Get Married didn't give Grumpy Sunshine. It gave Sunshine, and the Grumpy is literally a demon. Like,
wherever you go now.
Trina said you might like it.
Trina lied.
By looking at these examples, we can see that Karen and Frank do not exactly fit this mold perfectly because they are way more nuanced, and that's why I want to examine them today.
Page. Karen Page.
So chronologically, I must start with my bestie Karen Page because she exists first in the timeline of Karen and Frank in the course of these shows. You would think I would just look up what episodes that they all interact and just watch those and be done in a day. But no, according to the release order of these shows, which I haven't seen in its entirety in years, if I remember correctly from memory, Daredevil Season 1, Daredevil Season 2, Punisher Season 1, Defenders, Punisher Season 2, and Daredevil Season 3. I watched all of that in under a month. No, I'm not okay. Basically, if you're a true delusional shipper, you look at everything under a magnifying glass and then a microscope. So I had to do what I had to do. And I'm actually really scared of like the editing version of myself. I wonder how she's feeling right now. Yeah. Immediately, I have to commend Daredevil for legitimizing Karen Page in the show. It's hard for characters to fall by the wayside when they exist out of the titular character or the main duo, as in Nelson and Murdock in the show. It's crazy because I didn't remember her literally being present from the very first episode. So when I went back to rewatch, they made her feel essential to the plot. The pilot of the show starts with the origin of Daredevil and something about Ninja Turtles, dad's dying, acid. I really don't know. We're here for Karen Page, so let's move on. The first episode of Daredevil establishes a baseline for who Karen Page is, and with that context, we have a really good idea of what her key attributes are. The crux of Karen Page's character to me after watching all of this is to be an anchor between Nelson and Murdoch. Not only that, is genuinely to be a good person. This good person idea is immediately shown when we see Karen trying to take down a big corporation who is known for harming people. It's important to note that this company is taking advantage of people in the time that the Avengers have destroyed New York. So Union Allied Construction is basically scamming funds and acting like they are giving people pensions in the time that they are supposed to be reconstructing New York after the Avengers tore it up. That's nasty work, okay? Now, when Karen asks for help to take down this big company and someone else gets hurt, Daniel Fisher, she really harbors that guilt. And Matt and Foggy asked to be her lawyers in this episode, despite them only having practiced for a couple hours at this point.
How long have you been practicing law?
Time is it? About 7 hours.
Also important to note that Karen didn't really know them, so when she perceives that they're in danger, she even tries to flee mid-episode. She doesn't even know these people, and yet she wants to ensure their safety. Now, as I mentioned, there's a morally gray aspect of Karen Page that makes her interesting. In fact, this show does a great job at fleshing out characters that are just side characters, but we see recurring. Some of these characters even exist outside of just Daredevil alone, and that makes the universe feel more expansive because it's like real life. So Karen Page having layers is a way to really immerse you into the story. Essentially, she adds context to the story with the conversations she has and the inner turmoil she has that we see over the course of the show. Karen Page is someone who will go the extra mile around the office just because it's her job, but she also keeps a mouse tool in her purse. The first episode has imagery too that reiterates the complexities of Karen's character. When Karen and Matt are talking at the end of their conversation, there's a shot of windows just above their head. Matt's side is clearly more clouded than Karen's side. Karen's side having more distinctly clear frame shows the juxtaposition of these two identities. For Matt, his cloudy side is obviously Daredevil and that urge to physically hurt people. And while there are clear panels on Karen's side, there is still some fog or condensation on hers, which I think kind of indicate that part of herself that is willing to do things that are bad in the pursuit of good. And the idea of window imagery is used often in this episode specifically. When we see a flashback of Matt when he's younger, there's a window over his head in the back and it's clear, kind of indicating that he hasn't been morally corrupt by this idea that he has to hurt people or that he himself as Daredevil has to save Hell's Kitchen. And the only time we see this window covered is when his dad shows up to open the fridge, kind of like those attributes of his dad are what led him to be this morally corrupt person. And we know that to be true because Jack says to him that he doesn't want Matt to end up like him.
I'm tired, Dad.
Hey, I don't want you to end up
Like your old man.
I never studied.
Essentially, these traits about Jack is what we see lead Matt to this darkness in the window. And people could say that I'm reaching, but genuinely, I feel like I cooked with my analysis. No shade, because the windows could simply just be anything. But no, it's true. Another important detail about Karen's character is whether or not she thinks vigilantes are needed. More importantly, whether or not she thinks that they are good people. In the very first occurrence we see of Karen doing something like this, Foggy says that the man in the mask, not knowing that it's Matt, is weird. Karen, however, is kind of reluctant to agree and just says that she's happy to be out of jail because he helped her.
You really should be thanking the nut in the mask.
He's not a nut. I mean, he's a little weird.
If it weren't for you two, I'd still be in that cell.
And this happens almost every single episode. I noted down occurrences for when Karen said something where she's kind of on a vigilante side, quite literally almost every episode. This even progresses in severity when we see in episode 9 that Fisk basically is a criminal mastermind. He plots the death of Mrs. Cardenas, which everyone takes very hard, Karen and Foggy especially, Matt for his own reasons. When we see Fisk on screen do his interview, Karen says that she hopes the man in the mask knocks his damn head off.
Well, then let's pray the mask gets his hands on him. Knocks his goddamn head off.
I'm shocked! This is shocking news!
And to be honest, while this is extremely real, I think it's more important to note that this is an early sign of her being privy to violence when she's been wronged. This is something that Frank would and does do. And there's so many things that Karen says or does, but one quote that I picked out that she says is that
there's nothing worse than feeling
Choices are made for us. There's nothing you can do but swim in shit and hope you don't get too much in your mouth.
So again, this echoes that part of her identity that thinks vigilantes might be a necessity, and even more so that part of her that's pessimistic, and that's a trait that a lot of characters have where they're a villain or an anti-hero. Take characters like Josh and Killmonger from Until Dawn and Black Panther, both in very different situations, but they become the character that they are because of past experiences that they've endured. They later become an antagonist in their story because they don't become complacent with what happened to them before. They don't let the shit collect in their mouth. And that sounds disgusting, but you understand my point in connection to Karen's quote. So some of the best characters act out of revenge or in response to what other people do, and this is what Karen's character highlights. As I mentioned, Daredevil does an amazing job at writing their characters because by episode 11, Karen catches her first body. In a defining moment for her character, she actually pops Wesley, and she popped him 7 times. I counted. I sat there and counted how many times she popped him, and she kept spraying. Love that for her. When we get to the final season, Fisk finally finds out that Karen is the one that took out Wesley. Mind you, this is season 1. He found out in season 3. He was getting that get back, for real. Because of this, we get an entire episode dedicated to Karen, and it is amazing. The way they misdirected us to make us think that Karen was going to die in this, and even had imagery of the comic book where she dies in reverse. Although Karen makes small remarks about her family throughout the entirety of the show, things I noted down like her neighbor's cooking, the fact that she played basketball when she was younger, the fact that she's no longer religious because her parents were. This is the most information that we get about her family to date. In season 3 episode 10 of Daredevil titled Karen, we learned that not only is Karen addicted but also is selling with her boyfriend Todd.
I mean, who is Todd?
In this episode, she's very clearly unlike anything we've ever seen Karen be like in the show to this point. However, there's still lingering parts of her character in there, like when her family calls her, even though she doesn't want to, she still goes. She also takes the financial burden extremely hard. She also took her mother's death really hard, and that's what led her to do drugs. And we can kind of infer that because we see her family struggling so hard with money, that this is part of the reason why she started selling drugs to begin with. Now, speed running this episode a little bit, which was just emotional turmoil. Her brother Kevin attacks Todd, bitch ass Todd, and in an attempt to defend her brother, Karen shoots Todd. Then when they flee the scene, Karen accidentally flips the car and her brother Kevin died in the process. So when Karen and her dad finally have a chance to sit down and talk about this, he has the audacity to say, "Thank God your mother isn't alive to see this."
Miss Jackson.
Even after all of this, Karen still offers to pay for her brother's funeral, and her dad says no. He declines and says,
Leave. I don't want you here, Karen.
okay. Through all of this, I would describe Karen Page as someone who has an inherent desire to do good despite of all the horrible things that go on around her. Karen Page has a willingness to do things that aren't necessarily socially accepted to get a good outcome, basically in the pursuit of justice. The flashbacks to her family not only establish why she is the way she is, like her owning a gun, but also her willingness to let vigilantes run amok. They do what she cannot.
I'm not crazy, okay?
When season 2 of Daredevil came on, I have never been more happy in my life to have horrible memory and to feel like Dory from Nemo, because I did not know Frank showed up in the very first episode. When I saw that room get sprayed with amazing accuracy, I immediately knew it was him. Also, what are the odds that in the very first episode that Frank Castle is introduced, they start trying to do some mind control on you and introduce Karen and Matt? No, like, you can't trick me, never.
I leave you two alone for 1 minute.
She wanted to teach me.
Now, in my notes, I said this, which I think describes Frank perfectly, and I will read it. I've never seen a person in media so committed to getting their lick back. And I think that's besides Ellie in The Last of Us, because she was wavering a little bit, but Frank never let up. And it's so funny that I even mentioned The Last of Us, again, one of my favorite games of all time. But it's funny that I mention it because literally in the first scene that we see Frank's face, he is spraying like he is Tommy Miller. And this is crazy because it's Karen and Frank's first actual interaction, and it's him trying to shoot the guy that Karen is protecting. We're not off to a good start, but we have got to get through this, guys. Please just hear me out, okay? Now, Frank Castle is a complicated man, one which people literally call the Grim Reaper before he gets the name the Punisher. Some people think he's helping, some people think he's horrible and needs to go to jail. In his first interactions with people, we see he's short, he's gruff, he's like brash, need that. But also when he encounters a weirdo, it's so over, like, and I love that he does not hesitate.
Or maybe you're in the market for something younger. She's barely 12.
The fuck? What that mean?
And this is even a parallel between Matt and Frank. They're presented with similar situations, and where Matt beats someone up and threatens them to never do it again and possibly leave it up to chance that they could do it again and just says that he will know. Frank stops it dead in his tracks. I have to stand. And I think Frank's section of this video might be significantly shorter than Karen's, because while he's a more nuanced character, he stands by an ideology that's very straightforward and he doesn't really waver from. His ethos is stated plainly and clearly in season 2, episode 3. When talking to Matt, we find out Frank is not only from New York, but he's also Catholic too. In that, we see the first big attribute of Frank Castle, and probably the most important one, is that he's acting out of revenge and grief over the death of his family, and he wants revenge, okay? He also has other characteristics like his time in the Marines and going in so young that hint at and show why he has this strong resolve about him. Also, the way that he's able to use all of these weapons with such skill. And honestly, every time I hear about Marines, it just gives me House of Ashes vibes. Like, I feel real patriotic. It's giving oorah, like, love the top tier game. Tap into that too. I'm giving y'all all kind of recommendations to that. And honestly, the most important thing in this episode, Frank calls Matt a coward, and he says, you're one bad day away from being me. You're one bad day away from becoming the Punisher. And I actually think that he could, because the amount of times we've seen Matt crash out over the course of this show is unreal. When we meet characters like Micro, Madani, Amy, they all love Frank because he's a great guy. He's the only one that can't see it about himself, and it's truly telling that they all want to stay around him. He just pushes them away, and his best relationships are ones where he doesn't. Like, Curtis is the best guy around, truly. And again, his section is petite because he lost his family, he acted on revenge, that's his ethos, and he thinks Matt is a coward because he doesn't. Like, there isn't much else to say. Love my man, but we covered everything we needed to cover. Take it up with production. They telling me to wrap his section up. Now, if you thought that section went a little bit too quick, it's because I'm speed running, because I want to get into why I do not like Karen and Matt. Yes, do not. Write that down. Do not.
How can I be this mad at someone who saved my life?
The main issue that I have with this, besides the fact that Karen and Matt are just better as friends, is that they are fundamentally different. And I wouldn't trade anything from my Nelson, Murdoch, and Paige moments. Truly, when people start dating, you ruin their entire dynamic. So just get it away from me. That's number one, truly. And that wasn't even in my notes. I'm just freeballing, because you will never take my friendship away from me. Just saying. Yes, Karen and Matt do have natural chemistry. And yes, I did watch those scenes of them kissing and smile really bad because it was very sweet. However, I will never get behind it. I have to be a hater when hating is due. And in fact, I actually shipped Karen more with Foggy than Matt. And sorry to say, but Matt Murdoch is genuinely just a hoe. And that's not me trying to be mean. Literally in the first scene we see of Foggy, he assumes that Matt was with a girl overnight.
45. Is that a moan? Do you have somebody in bed with you?
And honestly, even in comics, he is so ran through, he's literally Marvel's Nightwing, and you can't tell me otherwise. And that's not me hating and slut shaming, because I will happily add myself to the roster. But for this video, we have to call him out. I'm slut shaming you already. We have to. Matt Murdoch is just alluring in a way that naturally attracts people, including me, okay? But the inner turmoil he has and the lack of care and compassion that he has for people when this is occurring makes me irritated. And you could call me a hypocrite because Frank kind of does the same thing as I just said, but it's different, okay? It's different. Claire is a recurring character in these shows. She was literally in Defenders, in Daredevil, of course, and I feel like I also remember her being in Luke Cage. Anyways, Claire gets wrapped up with Matt because she's a nurse and she helps him when he's like beat up at night. Every Wattpad and Tumblr writer's dream, because the amount of time I've seen people write about a reader who is stitching up Matt at night is unreal, but I digress. She gets kidnapped at one point. When she gets kidnapped, Matt takes this way harder, and if you know anything about him when you watch these shows, he takes things happening to other people way harder than if he literally got beat up. He internalizes that for so long, but it's not in a good way that makes him hold the people that he loves closer. It makes him push them away to a point where he's literally by himself all the time. And more importantly, that's not who Karen is, to give up or to change course. Literally in the next scene, she's still investigating Daniel Fisher because she has this urgency to still do the right thing despite him already being dead. She doesn't want to push people away because she fears for their safety. Rather, she's trying to make the space around her safe. Clock that. Because Matt is not going to stop being Daredevil for nobody. So this is a common thread for Matt and Karen, because we see they want to keep people safe, but they do it in different ways. When there's moments of Matt trying to investigate Fisk, not only does he take this recon mission as time to flirt with Vanessa, he also comes back suddenly saying he don't want to kill Fisk no more. Okay. And honestly, that's just crazy to me, because I know we can't do eye for an eye, but Fisk literally already killed people. What happened to superheroes getting that get back? Just saying. So when Matt comes back with this newfound idea, it just hints again at this part of him that's so integral about him that I love. I would never change that about him. That his faith is what gets him through every day. It's the core of his entire character. You can't take that away from Matt Murdock. But you have to say that with his faith, it holds him back in a way that it does not hold Frank back. And that's not to say that anything is wrong about that. It's just how it is. Then we hop to Defenders, which Karen isn't really in, but one of the most important conversations she has is in episode 1 with Matt. Now at this point, Matt has decided to give up Daredevil, and he's citing that it drove people away and that chapter of his life is closed. Sure, Jan. Karen, like herself, tries to comfort him, and she reassures him that Daredevil made the city a better place. That was her first words. Later she says that the city is better off with Matt Murdock, but girl, you said Daredevil first.
The NYPD is prevailing. Crime rate's down. I really think that Daredevil may have made the city a safer place.
But right now the city's better off without him.
Well, it's better off with Matt Murdock.
Again, this just reiterates her tendency to think that vigilantes have a better way of handling things. All in all, looking at this, I think that my issue with Matt is that he is just fickle. I think Karen responds better to people who are set in their ways, and that's just real. Truthfully, Karen Page is an amazing friend. Every time Matt said that he wanted to stop, she would be like, okay, then stop. But now suddenly life's too complicated. He wants to get back into Daredevil out of nowhere. Mind you, all of this for Elektra again? Like, when I say fickle, really fickle. And that's not to say anything about Elektra, because my last and final damn note is that forget everything that I just said about their analysis. Matt should have just been with Elektra, and that's just because I like my ships a little sad. You mean to tell me that they knew each other for a long ass time? She disappeared, came back, died, came back to life, and died again? Give it to me. For real. Now I've talked about Karen, Frank, and my interesting relationship with Matt Murdock, but I must talk about Castle now, which we are all here for. Before I really get into this, let's read a quote from Deborah herself, who plays Karen in the show. In a 2017 article, she says, "I like to say that Karen wears a disguise as much as Daredevil and Punisher do. The pretty blonde smiling girl is just a way of saying, hey, don't look too deep because you might not like what you find. And I think Frank is capable of seeing past that. Karen certainly looks at him and says, well, he takes justice into his own hands. I did that at least once, so I can't just call him a monster. She's a little more open to understanding him instead of writing him off." And I could literally just mic drop right there, but we're gonna keep going, okay? From the words of Karen, Deborah herself. Let's keep going. According to my notes, the very first thing that Karen and Frank can relate on is survivor's guilt. For Frank, it is his wife, son, daughter, and people along the way that he's cared about. For Karen, it is also her family, namely her mom and brother, but also metaphorically her dad, and then characters along the way like Ben Urich and Daniel Fisher. Despite their actions being different, Karen and Frank both have this urge to make things right and to fix things when they go wrong. For Karen, this could just be investigating people and writing her articles. For Frank, is putting people down, hitting them and making sure they stay down. And I even tried to be real strict on myself, to pick out real meaningful things. But honestly, the way that he looks at her alone, the way that she lets him talk about his family without ever discouraging him, like, I will scream right now. So more on Daniel Fisher and Karen. In the show, we see Karen visit Daniel Fisher's wife after Daniel's passing. This is indicative of her character again, because we see she's so caught up in the idea of taking hush money that she quite literally can't sit around and do nothing.
And as a show of good faith, my clients would like to offer you a lump sum of 6 months' salary.
For what?
She's adamant about doing the right thing. And even still, at the end of the episode, Karen decides to work with Ben Urich to take down Union Allied as opposed to taking this payout. And we know she needs the money. So for Frank, his idea of doing the right thing manifests in his connections with characters like Micro and Amy. With Micro, they start off as enemies, but they eventually become good friends, and we see this manifest over the course of the entire first season. We see that Frank takes Micro's safety seriously, and this even trickles down to his wife and kids. In episode 6 of The Punisher, we see this scene where he's like, wait. And yes, this is like a popular meme or whatever, but it has a significance that I really want to look at more. In this imagery, it's again this repeated thought and like trauma of his family dying. But when we see in this imagery that David and his kids are there too, and his wife are there too, that David has progressed from just friend to a familial relationship, that he cares about them just as highly as Maria and his kids. And it's important to note that we don't see Karen in this clip, and not that he doesn't care about her, but I think it's important that we establish that he cared about Micro so much in that short time that he established his family, and that parallel of him being Micro with a wife, a son, and a daughter so closely to his own that he couldn't let anything happen to him, and he feared for them as much as he feared for the loss of his own family. So this is a defining moment for Frank's character arc, and it also occurs after he sees someone die who he doesn't think deserve it, so he's not completely insensitive to death. He just has a unique outlook on it. And despite so much having happened in the show, I can't give you a comprehensive recap because Karen literally disappears for like the entirety of the show. But her final appearance is in season 2, episode 11 of Punisher. And people will say that their fave ships are horrible because someone died. Truly, mine are so much worse because they didn't die. They just never loved each other the way that they should have. Free me. To provide a quick synopsis for you of their final interaction, Frank is in the hospital as he always is, and Karen comes to the hospital and poses as his lawyer so that she can get in. While he's there, he's harboring this guilt of thinking he killed some innocent people, which he didn't. He was literally framed for it, but he doesn't know this at the time. And the reason he's taking it so hard is that he can empathize with that feeling because he immediately connects it with his family's death. And more importantly, with his ideologies, he straight up says that he should be next. Like, he's ready to go to the guillotine tomorrow. It was given, take him off the pyramid. Like, not even bottom of the pyramid. Like, take him off the pyramid. It was giving that. Now, as I said, he doesn't know that he was set up. Before we even get to that point, Karen says that wouldn't change the way she feels about him, even if he did do it. And I also think it's so telling that in this scene, so many people show up for Frank because he thinks that he has nobody in this world and he wants to be lonely on purpose. Yet these people all want to help him. Now, in the worst display I have ever seen, Frank crashing out. He asks her to leave. He even asks about Matt, saying if he knows that Karen is here. And Karen asks him to let all of this go and to basically, essentially, to love her and let all of this go and to give life another chance with a different outlook. And he said no. And mind you, this is worse than death because he didn't even say no because he didn't love her. He said no because he doesn't deserve a happy ending, that he doesn't deserve anything good.
What if there is? What if you and I will figure it out together?
There's no warm, cozy ending, not for me.
You cannot keep loving people in your dreams. Done with this.
Like, it's so over. So keep in mind, Karen knows that Matt is Daredevil. I think that Frank figured this out at the trial. With that in mind, I think inherently he thinks that Matt is a better person because he does not kill people, which is essentially the public view of him. And this is crazy because he can see clearly the type of person Karen is. He can see her with an intricacy that nobody else can. Despite me hating this and that their last thing ever is Karen simply saying good luck Frank, not even to him but outside, I think the characterization of them is on point.
Good luck, Frank.
Her helping him to escape and him pushing her away because he thinks he doesn't deserve a good life. You know, I just have to take what I'm given, the crumbs that I'm given, because at least they didn't mess up my characters by just making them act so differently than what we've seen them do, you know. But truly, I think I'm just in so much pain that I revisited this in such a short amount of time that I think I need another new. I think that with Daredevil Born Again, I would love for them to interact at least once, but I think the bar is so low. I actually just would love for Karen to not die in the show. Like, I'm so serious right now. Because I genuinely think with so many people in the returning cast, I think people about to drop like flies, and I genuinely might crash out. And you know what? If they die, I die. If Einstein goes away, I go away. If they can't make me leave, I will go with that cat. And I'm not kidding. I will go with that cat. I will go with that cat. Like, I'm actually serious. I will go with that cat. I think this is my most chaotic video considering the time constraints with which I decided to do this. I decided to do this the beginning of February, and Daredevil Born Again comes out the beginning of March. And generally, I'm excited to see the show. However, I need Karen and Frank to talk, to do something. Like, you don't understand. This feels like Julie and the Phantoms all over again. Karen and Frank, nothing happened. Like, a kiss on the cheek and maybe holding hands. This is worse than somebody dying. And you might think this is crazy, but I genuinely think that the world goes round with good ships. It's been like 10 years, and yet I'm still here standing firm that Castle is one of the best ships of all time. Nobody asked me for this. Nobody wanted this. And yet I know that there's like 10 Castle fans out there that are somewhere watching this video with the hugest smiles on their face. And I love that for y'all. Thank you for watching. Even if one person saw this and was happy with what I said, I made someone's wish come true. And you know what? That's all I aim to do.